The veterans called them ghosts, phantoms born from the cursed mountains. One moment the supply column is moving through a narrow pass, the air thick with the smell of pine and sweat. The next, chaos. A boulder crashes down from an unseen cliff, smashing a wagon to splinters. Before the men can even draw their swords, arrows hiss out of the trees, finding throats and chests with unnatural precision. There are screams, shouts from the officers to form a line, but there is no line to form. There is no enemy to fight, just shadows and death. The attack is over as quickly as it began. The survivors are left trembling, clutching their weapons, staring at the silent, watching trees. They haven't seen a single attacker's face. This wasn't a battle, it was a haunting, and the ghost at the heart of it all had a name that was once their own, a name whispered with a mix of awe and terror in the Sultan's court: Skanderbeg. The man the world would come to know as Skanderbeg. Look at a map of the mid-15th century. The Ottoman Empire is a behemoth, an unstoppable tide of conquest that has swallowed kingdoms and shattered empires. It stretches from Anatolia to the Danube. Its armies are the most disciplined, most technologically advanced fighting force on the planet. Its Sultan, Murad II, and later his son, Mehmed the Conqueror, are two of the most brilliant military minds in history. And then there is Albania, a tiny, rugged patch of mountains, a collection of rival clans with a handful of warriors. On paper, this is not a fight, it's an execution. The mightiest empire on earth against a nation that could fit inside one of its provinces. Yet for 25 years, this impossible equation held. For 25 years, the tide of Ottoman conquest broke against these mountains. Not because of impenetrable walls or vast armies, but because of the mind of one man. A man who understood the empire's strengths because he was raised by it. A man who knew how to turn its power into its greatest weakness. If you want to know how David beats Goliath, you study the Guerrilla's Playbook, and Skanderbeg wrote it. If you've ever felt like the underdog, make sure you're subscribed, because this is a story you need to hear. His story doesn't begin in a throne room, but in a cage. A gilded one, but a cage nonetheless. He was born George Castrioti, son of an Albanian lord who dared to resist the Ottomans and lost. As was custom, to ensure his father's loyalty, George was taken as a political hostage to the Ottoman court of Sultan Murad II. This was the devshirme system, a blood tax designed to strip rebellious nations of their future leaders. But George wasn't just any hostage. He was brilliant. He excelled. In the Enderun school, the elite academy that produced the empire's greatest generals and viziers, he mastered warfare, theology, and politics in Turkish, Arabic, Persian, and Slavic languages. Sultan Murad saw the fire in the boy. He saw a weapon. He converted him, renamed him Iskender after Alexander the Great, and gave him the title Bey, or Lord. Skanderbeg, the Albanian prodigy. He was a son to the Sultan, a brother to the future conqueror of Constantinople. The empire gave him everything: an education, a command, a future. They were forging their finest sword. And for years, that sword served its master faithfully. Skanderbeg became one of Murad's most trusted commanders. He rode at the head of Ottoman armies, crushing rebellions in the Balkans and Anatolia. He learned the rhythm of the Ottoman war machine from the inside. He memorized its formations, its supply chains, its command structure. He understood its psychology, its reliance on overwhelming force, its arrogance in the face of smaller foes, its methodical approach to siege warfare. He saw its strengths, but more importantly, he saw its vulnerabilities. Every victory he won for the Sultan was a lesson. Every campaign was a chapter in a textbook he was secretly writing. He was the perfect Ottoman general, praised for his courage and tactical genius. No one suspected the embers of his past were still burning. No one imagined that the heart of George Castrioti still beat beneath the armor of Skanderbeg. The moment came in 1443. A great Christian crusade, led by the Hungarian general Jan Hunyadi, was pushing into the Balkans. The Ottomans were on the back foot. At the Battle of Niš, Skanderbeg was commanding a contingent of Ottoman troops. He saw his chance. This wasn't going to be a dramatic battlefield betrayal, a clash of swords. It was going to be an act of audacious intellectual theft. He didn't defect, he staged a coup with a pen. He cornered the Sultan's chief secretary and, under the threat of death, forced him to write a fake letter. A letter stamped with the Sultan's forged seal, addressed to the governor of Kruja, the strategic heart of Albania. The letter was a masterpiece of deception. It declared that the Sultan was appointing Skanderbeg as the new governor-general of Albania and ordered the current governor to hand over the fortress immediately. It was perfect. It was treason. With the forged document in hand, Skanderbeg, along with 300 loyal Albanian followers, simply abandoned the Ottoman army and rode for home. The ride to Kruja was a race against time. He knew that once the Ottoman army regrouped from the battle, his desertion would be discovered and the truth of the letter would be exposed. He pushed his men relentlessly. When he arrived at the gates of Kruja, he played his part perfectly. He was Skanderbeg, the Sultan's favored general, the new governor. He presented the letter. The governor, seeing the Sultan's seal and recognizing the famous commander, suspected nothing. The gates were opened. Skanderbeg and his men were welcomed inside. That night, while the Ottoman garrison slept, Skanderbeg's men moved. There was no great slaughter. They systematically took control of the castle's key points. The governor was killed, the garrison overwhelmed. The next morning, a new flag was raised over the fortress. Not the Ottoman crescent, but a blood-red banner bearing a black, double-headed eagle, the ancient symbol of the Castrioti family. After 20 years, Georg Castrioti was home, and he had just stolen the most important castle in Albania without firing a single arrow. Taking one castle was an act of defiance. To hold a nation required a miracle of politics. Albania was not a unified country. It was a fractured land of powerful, feuding clans, each fiercely independent and jealous of their own power. They hated the Ottomans, but they often hated each other just as much. Skanderbeg knew that his rebellion would be crushed in weeks if he couldn't unite them. He called a council in the town of Lej. He stood before the chieftains, men who were his rivals, men whose families had fought his, and he made his case. He spoke not as a king, but as a first among equals. He argued that their petty feuds would be their doom. Only a united front, a league of Albanian princes could hope to stand against the wrath that was about to be unleashed by the Sultan. His charisma, his military reputation, and the sheer audacity of his return won them over. They formed the League of Lej, a military alliance with Skanderbeg as its commander-in-chief. For the first time, Albania had an army. In Edirne, the news was met with disbelief, then incandescent rage. This was not just a rebellion. This was a profound, personal betrayal. The Sultan had seen Iskander as a son. He had educated him, promoted him, trusted him. And that same man had used the empire's own tools, its authority, its seal, its military knowledge, to stab him in the back. This was an insult that could not be borne. Murad II was not a man to be trifled with. He was a hardened, experienced ruler who had crushed dozens of rebellions. He immediately dispatched one of his best generals, Ali Pasha, with an army of 25,000 elite soldiers. The orders were simple: crush the rebellion, kill Skanderbeg, and bring his head back on a pike. For the Ottoman High Command, this was a routine police action, a quick, brutal campaign to put down an upstart. They had no idea they were marching into a slaughterhouse. Skanderbeg knew he could never win a conventional war. His army was tiny, perhaps 10,000 to 15,000 men at its peak. He had no heavy cavalry, no siege cannons, no vast treasury. What he had was Albania itself, the cursed mountains. This was his true fortress, a landscape of jagged peaks, impenetrable forests, and treacherous passes where a large army could not maneuver. It was a terrain that broke supply lines, exhausted soldiers, and turned organized formations into a confused rabble. Skanderbeg understood this land intimately. He knew every trail, every cave, every spring. While the Ottomans saw a hostile wilderness, Skanderbeg saw a weapon. He would not fight their kind of war. He would make them fight his. A war of ghosts and shadows, a war of attrition, fear, and exhaustion. The first great test came at the plain of Torvial. Ali Pasha, confident in his superior numbers, marched his army into a valley, expecting Skanderbeg to meet him in a pitched battle. It was exactly what Skanderbeg wanted him to think. But Skanderbeg didn't meet him on the plain. Instead, he did something unthinkable. He divided his smaller force into 3 and concealed them in the woods surrounding the valley. He then sent a small decoy force to lure the Ottomans forward. Ali Pasha took the bait. He ordered a full charge, eager to crush the small band of rebels. As the Ottoman army surged into the middle of the plain, their formations breaking in their haste, Skanderbeg gave the signal. From the woods on both flanks, the hidden Albanian forces slammed into the Ottoman lines. Simultaneously, Skanderbeg led the main charge from the front. The Ottomans were caught in a perfect 3-pronged envelopment. Panic ripped through their ranks. They were surrounded, confused, being cut down from all sides. It was a massacre. The result was a catastrophe for the Ottomans. Out of 25,000 men, as many as 22,000 were killed, captured, or scattered. Ali Pasha barely escaped with his life. Skanderbeg lost only 100 men. He had annihilated a professional army 10 times the size of his own casualty count. The victory sent a shockwave through the region. The Albanian clans, some of whom were still hesitant, now flocked to his banner. In the courts of Venice, Hungary, and Naples, the name Skanderbeg was suddenly on everyone's lips. Who was this Albanian prince who could so utterly humiliate the Sultan's army? For Sultan Murad, the news was a bitter pill. This was no longer a minor rebellion. This was a serious threat. The first ghost story had been written in blood, and the Sultan now knew the haunting was real. Torvial wasn't a fluke. It was the first demonstration of a brutal, effective playbook. Rule number 1, never fight a battle you're not certain to win. Skanderbeg refused to engage in pitched battles where the Ottomans' superior numbers and heavy cavalry would dominate. Instead, his warfare was the war of the flea. His men, moving in small, swift bands, would strike where the enemy was weakest: supply trains, foraging parties, rear guards. They would appear out of nowhere, inflict maximum damage, and then melt back into the mountains before the enemy could mount a response. This had a devastating effect. It meant the massive Ottoman armies couldn't live off the land. Every scrap of food, every piece of equipment had to be transported through hostile territory, under constant threat of attack. It bled the army slowly, sapping its strength and morale long before it ever reached a battlefield. Skanderbeg's second rule was to attack the enemy's mind. He understood that an army's greatest weakness is fear. His forces conducted relentless night raids, not always to kill, but to create chaos and deprive the Ottoman soldiers of sleep. They would bang drums and sound horns from the hills all night, making their small numbers seem like a vast host gathering for an attack. They spread rumors and disinformation. Captured officers were sometimes treated with extreme courtesy and then released, carrying messages of Skanderbeg's strength back to their own camps, sowing doubt among the Ottoman command. For the common Ottoman soldier, Albania became a living nightmare. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. The mountains themselves seemed to be alive, and every shadow held threat. This constant psychological pressure was just as deadly as any sword. By 1450, Sultan Murad II had had enough. He was tired of his generals failing, tired of the constant humiliation. He decided to end this himself. He assembled one of the largest armies of the era, a force of at least 100,000 men, including his elite Janissary units, and marched on Albania with one goal: to take the fortress of Kruja and extinguish the rebellion for good. This was the ultimate expression of Ottoman power, a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The sight of the army was meant to inspire terror and awe, to convince the Albanians that resistance was futile. As they surrounded Kruja, they began a massive bombardment with their powerful cannons, the same type of artillery that would later bring down the walls of Constantinople. Murad was certain the castle would fall in days. But Skanderbeg once again refused to play by the Sultan's rules. He knew Kruja couldn't be held by his main army, so he left a small, determined garrison of 1,500 men inside the fortress, commanded by one of his trusted lieutenants, with enough supplies to last for months. He then took the rest of his army, about 8,000 men, and did the last thing the Sultan expected. He remained outside. The Sultan had come to lay a siege, but in reality, he was the one who was trapped. His massive army was now a stationary target, tethered to the ground around Kruja, while Skanderbeg, the Lion of Albania, was free to roam the mountains that surrounded them. The hunter had just walked into the hunter's cage. The siege turned into a slow, grinding nightmare for the Ottomans. While their cannons pounded the walls of Kruja, Skanderbeg's army waged a relentless war on the besiegers themselves. Under the cover of darkness, his men would creep into the sprawling Ottoman camp, slit the throats of sentries, set fire to tents, and disappear. They launched raid after raid on the Ottoman supply lines, snaking back through the mountains, capturing food, weapons, and gold. The huge Ottoman army began to starve. Disease, fueled by poor sanitation in the massive camp, began to spread. Every Ottoman soldier who strayed too far from the camp to forage for food or wood was a dead man. The besiegers were becoming the besieged. They were trapped in a circle of death, with an unbreakable castle in front of them and a phantom army all around them. One story, perhaps a legend, but one that perfectly captures his methods, tells of one of the most brilliant deceptions in military history. One night, Skanderbeg gathered a large herd of wild goats. His men tied lit torches to their horns. They then drove the herd down the mountainside towards the Ottoman camp. The Ottoman sentries, peering into the darkness, suddenly saw thousands of lights moving towards them, bobbing and weaving. They believed it was a massive, all-out assault by Skanderbeg's entire army. Panic erupted. The Janissaries scrambled to form battle lines to repel an attack that never came. While the camp was in chaos, distracted by the phantom goat army, Skanderbeg's real forces launched a devastating attack on another, completely unprotected section of the camp. He used the enemy's fear and imagination as his primary weapon. After 4 months, the Ottoman army was broken, not by a single battle, but by 1,000 cuts. They had lost tens of thousands of men to combat, disease, and starvation. Their morale was shattered. Winter was approaching. With his army disintegrating, a humiliated and furious Sultan Murad II had no choice but to lift the siege and retreat. The withdrawal was a disaster. Skanderbeg's forces harassed them every step of the way, turning the retreat into a rout. The Sultan, who had conquered vast territories, was defeated by a tiny fortress and an army of ghosts. The psychological blow was immense. Murad II would die a year later, a broken man, purportedly haunted by his failure in Albania. He had thrown the full might of his empire at Skanderbeg and had lost. The legend was now cemented in steel and stone. Murad's death brought a new, even more dangerous adversary to the throne, his son, Mehmed II. This was not his father. This was the man who, at the age of 21, would do what no other ruler had done for 1,000 years. He would conquer Constantinople. He was a strategic genius, a patron of the arts, and a man of boundless ambition and ruthless cruelty. He called himself the Kaiser Hirum, the Caesar of Rome. He saw himself as the heir to the Roman emperors, destined to rule the world. And in the middle of his grand design was this tiny, infuriating thorn, Skanderbeg. For Mehmed, this wasn't just strategy, it was personal. Skanderbeg was the man who had humiliated his father. He was a traitor to the Ottoman court where they had grown up together. He was a Christian warrior standing in the way of Mehmed's destiny. Conquering Albania became an obsession. For years, Mehmed the Conqueror, busy with consolidating his empire and conquering other lands, sent his best generals to deal with Skanderbeg. One after another, they failed. He sent Hamza Pasha, who was captured. He sent Firuz Pasha, who was killed. Each army was larger than the last, each commander more famous, and each one was outthought, outmaneuvered, and defeated by Skanderbeg and his mountain warriors. Skanderbeg's playbook was now legendary. He would use scouts to track the Ottoman army's movements, predict their path, and set the perfect ambush. He would use scorched earth tactics, burning crops and poisoning wells ahead of the advancing army, forcing them to rely on their easily attacked supply lines. For Mehmed, the conqueror of cities and empires, the repeated defeats were an intolerable stain on his reputation. Finally, in 1466, Mehmed decided to repeat his father's gamble, certain he would not repeat his father's mistakes. He marched on Albania himself, at the head of another colossal army. This was the conqueror of Constantinople, the master of siege warfare, bringing his full attention to bear on this single fortress. The second siege of Kruja was even more terrible than the first. Mehmed's cannons were larger, his methods more brutal. He systematically destroyed the surrounding countryside to deny Skanderbeg any support. He built a second fortress nearby just to control the area. He was determined to grind Kruja into dust through sheer, overwhelming force. Once again, Skanderbeg left a garrison inside and took his main army to the mountains. The deadly game began anew. But the playbook still worked. The garrison of Kruja fought with superhuman courage, repairing walls as fast as the cannons could break them, repelling every assault. And from the mountains, Skanderbeg's army once again bled the besiegers white. They raided his camps, ambushed his patrols, and cut his supplies. Mehmed, the strategic genius, found himself in the same trap as his father. He could not take the castle, and he could not stop the constant attacks from his rear. His army was a giant, swatting at a swarm of deadly wasps. After months of failure, even the great conqueror had to admit defeat. He could not take Kruja while Skanderbeg was alive. In a fury of frustration, he lifted the main siege, leaving behind a large force to maintain a blockade, and returned to his capital. The conqueror had been conquered. Skanderbeg had defeated 2 sultans, more than a dozen of their greatest generals, and had won over 20 major battles. He was never once defeated in a direct confrontation, but there was one enemy his playbook couldn't beat: time. In 1468, while organizing the defense of the land, Gerg Kastrioti Skanderbeg fell ill with malaria and died. He was not killed by an Ottoman sword or cannonball. He was taken by a fever. The news of his death was met with despair in Albania and celebration in the Ottoman Empire. Mehmed reportedly exclaimed, "At last, Europe and Asia are mine. Woe to Christendom, it has lost its sword and its shield." He knew that Skanderbeg was not just a man, but an idea, the idea of unbreakable resistance. And with the man gone, the idea might finally be broken. Without his leadership, the Albanian resistance eventually crumbled. 10 years after his death, Kruja finally fell. The Ottomans would rule Albania for the next 400 years. So, did he fail? No. For a quarter of a century, at a critical moment in history, he had single-handedly halted the Ottoman advance into the heart of Europe. His resistance gave kingdoms like Hungary and the Italian states precious time to prepare their defenses. He became a legendary figure across Europe, a symbol of Christian chivalry and the ultimate underdog. But his greatest legacy was for his own people. In their darkest hour, against the world's greatest power, he gave the Albanian people a hero. He united them, led them, and forged a national identity in the fires of war that would outlast the Ottoman Empire itself. The empire is gone. The sultans are dust, but the flag of Skanderbeg still flies over the mountains he fought for. He proved that the will of a few, guided by a brilliant mind, can defy the power of the many. What do you think was his most brilliant tactic? Let me know in the comments below.